Welcome back. We're continuing our study of Augustine, and in this particular lecture, we're going to be taking a brief look at his work entitled "The City of God," one of the great apologetic works in the history of historical theology. And so it's a complex work. We only have a brief time to look at it, so let's go ahead and get right to that. City of God is very famous. Many people that don't really know that much about Augustine associate his name with this particular work. The City of God is a philosophical and apologetical treatise vindicating Christianity. That's what apologetics is, to sort of answer the critics, answer the pagans. And this is the really one of the full titles, De Civitate de Contra Pagananus, that is concerning the City of God against the pagans. Why did he have to address the pagans? Well, the pagans thought the neglect of the gods is what had brought the decline of the empire and the invasion of the barbarians. It was a shock to just about everyone in the Roman world of the day when the Visigoths, a barbarian peoples, descended upon Rome and defeated its defenders in 410 AD. So now you can see that this is a number of years after Augustine has become the Bishop of Hippo. The fall of the Eternal City on 24 August 410, which was one of the great was of greater symbolic than political importance, and provoked a discussion of divine providence and history and debate about whether Christianity was about to bring about the collapse of the Roman Empire. So the issue there was the pagans said, well, the reason why we have lost, why the city of Rome fell, was because the gods were angry at us, and therefore they took away their protection, and they would have reasoned as well that the Christian God isn't strong enough to defend against these pagans, and so there was many who wanted to go back to worshiping the pagan gods and discredit Christianity. Against this ferment of argument, Augustine began to write a large and arduous work, magnum opus arduum, he called it, The City of God, developing themes which already appeared in another work that he had written on true religion, which he wrote as a layman, but now that he's a man, a bishop and responsible for souls, he needs to enlarge upon this. The contemporary pagan intellectuals, perhaps in self-defense, developed strongly antiquarian interests. What that means is when times are bad, people often look back to a golden age, a past time when everything was working. Now everything's not working. So they look back to the past. Whether that is ever really an honest assessment of the situation or fair is kind of beside the point, because it happens all the time. Their argument against Christianity said that it was not the pristine, that is, pagan tradition. So Augustine sets out to show from unimpeachable authority just how uninspiring and embarrassing this so-called pristine stuff was. What he does is he goes back and he shows against the pagan detractors that the pagan past wasn't that great, and paganism isn't that great of a religion, and didn't do the empire any service when it was pagan. The City of God, which is one of the most important books in world literature, says Gerald Bray, is a well-constructed defense of Christianity against its pagan detractors, based on the theme that there are two cities. There's the City of God and there's the City of the world, and they're in conflict with one another, and the question is, which is superior? Again, a masterpiece of Western culture, The City of God was written, again, in response to those pagan claims that the sack of Rome and by the barbarians was one of the consequences of the abolition of pagan worship. Augustine responded by asserting to the contrary. Christianity saved the city from complete destruction, and Rome's fall was the result of internal moral decay. Augustine worked on it for 13 years. The writing of the 22 books of this work occupied 13 years of his life, and he began at the age of 59 and completed it when he was 72. The title is from the Psalms. The title came from the Psalter and was chosen to offer a conscious contrast to the Republics of Plato and Cicero. These were books pagan writers wrote on what the best form of government would be. And all through his City of God, he's sort of pointing out how their notions of what a just society or proper government would be are proven to be ineffective and wrong. In a way, Augustine's City of God, even consciously, the Christian rejoinder to Plato's Republic and Cicero's own Republic, De Republica, as we've said. What's the outline? It's fairly simple. It's divided into 22 books. The first 10 refute the claims to the divine power of the various pagan communities. In other words, the first 10 said, if the pagan gods were powerful, they would have defeated Christianity before they had to defeat the pagans. And the last 12 retell the biblical story of mankind from Genesis to the Last Judgment, offering what Augustine presents as the true history of the City of God, against which and only against which the history of the city of man, including the history of Rome, can be properly understood. So in some respects, he kind of lumps the pagans and the barbarians together and say, you're actually one part of the story, and the other part of the story is what God is doing in the world. So again, there's the outline you can see. Books 1 through 5, he argues that paganism is useless for human society. Actually, it's not too difficult. Paganism was full of, the kinds of things we would expect. A lot of debauchery, a lot of superstition. And furthermore, in books 6 through 10, it was useless for knowing God, for real. Again, the defense of Christianity, he describes how the City of God and the City of the world came into being. The City of God, founded by God, obviously. The City of the world, by fallen human beings that create fallen institutions like human government. How the two cities developed over time. The City of God making progress through the church. Things are getting better for all of those who are adherents to the true faith, while the world is continuing to decline in the city of man. And what the final destiny of each of those cities be, and obviously the City of God is the destiny of heaven and paradise and knowing God, and the City of man is his destiny is hell and destruction. What's the main argument? Basically, it's not too difficult. The pagans are wrong. The decline is not the fault of the Christians. In fact, it just might be the other way around. The pagans, in their debauchery and their horrible religions, their endorsement of all kinds of sensual worship and really gross worship, and the kinds of things that they did in terms of a society of injustice and people striving through some pretty terrible conditions. That was all paganism, and Christianity is something that's opposed to all of that. He's not a pessimist. He didn't think things were going to continue to get better and better, but he knew the empire was not in good hands. He didn't think it was doomed, but he knew that it wasn't going to last forever, as nothing does. Several arguments. Empires come and go. And again, I've already said, people always think the times they live in are worse than the previous times. It's worse now than it ever has been, and everybody thinks that. People curse the times they live in, but neither the times are good or bad depends. Whether the times are good or bad depend on the moral quality of the individual and social life, and it's up to us. Each generation thinks its times are uniquely awful, and that morality and religion have never been so low. But he demonstrates that the morality and religion of the pagans was always pretty bad. Civilized values have never been more threatened, they think, and so he thought it was his duty to attack this sort of thinking and explain how it was wrong. Not only because empires always come and go, they're established by fallible humans. And again, the empire had basically a flawed understanding of justice, which was skewed to the rich and powerful, and to those that engaged in all kinds of gross sensuality and thought that they had achieved the highest place in life, that the gods were actually pleased with them because they engaged in all of this debauchery. Augustine noticed that the most vocal defenders of paganism were generally defenders of the social order in which the poor fawned on the rich and the rich exploited the poor. And he indicated that, again, was hardly the picture of a just society. The positive side of his argument was that we can look forward to the time when Jesus Christ will rule. This is interesting because it almost seems like he's thinking that there's a millennial kingdom coming, and for a while Augustine did think that, but actually he thought that before he wrote The City of God. So he outlined his vision for two societies, that of the elect and that of the damned. And the cities, these peoples really, are symbolic of two spiritual powers, faith and unbelief, that have contended with each other since the fall of the angels. And they are inextricably intermingled on the earth and will remain so until time's end. So he said, that's what you're seeing is what you should expect in a fallen world and what continue to see. He developed a theological interpretation of human history and which he perceives as linear and predestined, beginning with creation and ending with the second coming of Christ. So what we would probably say, yeah, we kind of recognize that as basically the biblical storyline from creation by God, perfectly good, to chaos after the fall, to the kingdom that's coming. What is the lasting influence of this particular book? Well, the stinging attack on paganism is part of the most memorable and effective part of the book. This book really sort of has a sort of Platonic notion to it, but it basically takes on Platonism that says things are going to get better and better through human beings, and if they don't, then there's something wrong with either your faith or your religion or your God. And he says basically what it is that you don't know the true God. The last books offer a vision of human destiny that this author says would be widely pervasive for at least 1,000 years, which is an ironic statement, because it's the notion that we are living in a fallen world. Still, we look forward to a time when Christ will rule and on this earth, and we won't have to deal with the things that we're dealing with now, because he's going to make it new. That's the City of God. City of God was one of the most influential books of the Middle Ages, because it could be read in various ways. At some points, it was viewed as justification, the founding document for the political order of kings and popes that I don't think Augustine had in mind at all. Indeed, his famous theory that people needed government because they're sinful served as a model for church-state relations in medieval times, and also influenced the work of St. Thomas and John Calvin. So kind of an odd sort of take on the City of God is that we live in a fallen world, but we're looking forward to the City of God. And some took that to suggest that they could actually create the City of God through political models. That would have been, again, Aquinas and Calvin, and they sought to do that. They sought to see basically the City of God on earth now. Others recognized that no, that City of God was something that was only going to come when Christ was here. Well, this author's James O'Donnell, who is a noted authority on Augustine, said the work is too long, and at times, particularly in the last book, too discursive to make satisfactory reading today. What he's saying is that most people only read it in an abridged version, and a lot of what it has to say, because of the different cultural situation that we're in, we really don't really follow it that well. Still, it remains impressive as a whole and fascinating in its parts, and it will continue to be a source of discussion and study. I'm thinking for as long as it takes before Christ actually comes back to establish that millennial kingdom. Well, again, we're going to stop here. I'm going to pick up with Augustine in the next couple of lectures before we move on to the opening of the Middle Ages. So we'll see you again soon.